I moved into the duplex because it was cheap and because I was tired of roommates touching my shit. First week, I did the boring adult stuff, changed the Wi-Fi name, taped a drafty window, stacked boxes in the basement so I wouldn't trip later. The place was one of those landlord specials, new paint where your eyes go, and old problems everywhere else. The basement door stuck, the handrail wobbled, and the air down there always had that damp concrete taste. I didn't care. I wanted quiet and control. I wanted to stop wondering who had been in my room when I wasn't home. The first wrong detail showed up on day 5. The basement light was on when I knew I'd shut it off. I'm annoying about lights. I'd do the little turn back look. I'd even jammed junk mail under the door to block the draft. The junk mail was shoved aside like somebody's shoe had nudged it. My brain tried to shrug it off. Loose switch, bad wiring. Maybe I bumped it, but my body didn't buy it. My stomach tightened and my hands went cold. I grabbed my phone, turned on a flashlight, and took my keys because they were metal and pointy and made me feel less useless. I listened at the door first. Nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, no TV from the other unit. Just the house settling. I opened the door and went down, slow, because the steps were narrow, and my brain kept imagining someone grabbing my ankle. The bulb buzzed. The air smelled sour, human sour, old sweat trapped in wet concrete, plus something sweet and rotten underneath. My boxes sat where I'd left them, labeled in Sharpa like I was pretending my life was organized. Then I saw the muddy prints. They were mine. They didn't wander. They went straight to the laundry alcove like someone had made a decision and didn't care if I saw it. I followed them with my phone light shaking, keys clenched so hard my knuckles hurt. The washer sat a little crooked. I put my hand on it and felt grit on top like it had been dragged. I yanked it out from the wall and my stomach dropped through the floor. Behind it was a nest, a blanket, fast food bags mashed flat and damp, a half-empty water jug. The concrete was dark in an oval like a body-shaped stain. And to the side was a tiny pile of my stuff, one sock, a charger, and a cheap kitchen knife I kept in my upstairs drawer. That knife made my throat go dry because it meant he'd been upstairs. Not once, not by accident. Upstairs long enough to open drawers and pick souvenirs. I backed up and almost tripped over my own boxes, and right then I heard a slow scrape above me in the ceiling like someone shifting weight between joists. I froze with my phone light aimed at nothing, listening. Another scrape, closer to the stairwell. My brain tried to tell me it was pipes. My body called bullshit. Pipes don't pause like they're listening back. The scraping came again, heavier, and I realized it had rhythm. Somebody was repositioning. Somebody heard me find his little hideout and was deciding what to do about it. I pictured eyes in a crack, watching the glow of my phone, and my chest tightened so hard it hurt. I ran. I tore up the stairs, slammed the basement door, and locked it like a lock meant anything. I dragged a chair against it even though the door opened inward, and the chair was mostly for my own comfort. Then I called the police with my back against the wall. My hand shook so bad I hit the wrong buttons at first, and I swore out loud. Loud enough that I hated myself for it. When the dispatcher answered, my voice came out fast and sharp. I kept repeating the same sentence. Someone is in my basement because if I stopped saying it, I was scared it would turn back into a maybe. She asked if I'd seen him. No. She asked if I had weapons. I said keys, which sounded stupid even to me. She told me to stay upstairs and keep the line open. While I waited, every normal house noise sounded like footsteps. The heat kicked on and I flinched. A pipe ticked and I felt my skin crawl. I checked the front door and the back door twice like I could undo whatever was happening. I stood in the kitchen staring at the basement door like it was going to breathe. I texted my landlord because my brain thought that was what adults did in emergencies. He sent a thumbs up emoji. A fucking thumbs up. I stared at it, furious, and texted back that a man was living in his basement, and if he didn't call me, I'd light him up online. No answer. When the cops finally pulled up, relief hit so hard my knees went loose. 2 officers came in with flashlights already out. I talked too fast, pointing, explaining, trying to sound sane. One told me to stay upstairs. I hated that. I hated being told to wait in my own home, but I did it because I wasn't going to charge downstairs and get myself hurt for pride. From the kitchen, I heard the basement door open, the stairs creak, then that same scraping sound. Louder now, like someone was trying to unstick himself from a tight spot. One officer barked a command. Then there was a thump and a rough scuffle. Boots on concrete. A grunt, something sliding. My heart hammered like it wanted out of my ribs. They came back up and said they'd found him. I followed them down anyway, because not seeing it felt worse than seeing it. In the furnace corner, they pulled a man out of a gap that shouldn't have fit a human body. He was wedged in there like a cockroach, filthy and damp, hair stuck up in greasy points. He didn't rush me. He didn't scream. He stared like I'd interrupted his routine. The cop yanked him free, and he fought like a cornered animal, spitting and cursing, leaving wet streaks on the concrete as his shoes dragged. One officer kept his body between me and the guy, but I still caught the smell: sweat, piss, old food, and that sour basement rot. And it made my stomach roll because it wasn't a story anymore. It was a person who'd been breathing my air. I asked how he got in, and the cop shrugged and said old houses have gaps, crawl spaces, loose panels. People get creative, like it was a hobby. They hauled him out and the door shut behind them, and my place felt too quiet. Not safe quiet, empty after a fight quiet. I went back downstairs and stared at the nest behind the washer like I was looking at a crime scene in my own life. I kept thinking about the knife. I kept thinking about my charger being unplugged from the wall. I kept thinking about the one sock. It hit me in little waves. He'd been upstairs while I was gone, maybe while I was home. He'd listened. He'd watched. He knew my routine better than I did. I started replaying the week like security footage. The kitchen drawer that was half open one morning. The shower curtain that was pulled back when I knew I closed it. The charger showing up on the counter instead of by the couch. The faint scrape marks on the basement door frame I'd assumed were old. I even remembered waking up once around 3 a.m. to a soft clunk, like something set down gently, and rolling over because I didn't want to be the kind of person who panics at house sounds. Turns out I'd been the kind of person who ignored a stranger moving through my life. One of the officers called later to tell me they'd run him, and he'd been picked up before for trespassing and squatting. Hearing that didn't make me feel better. It made me feel stupid for thinking I was special, like my quiet little duplex was some protected bubble. That night, I tried to sleep and couldn't. I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand, staring at the basement door, waiting for the glass on the knob trick to rattle, even though I knew it was pointless. At one point, I caught myself listening for his breathing through the vents, and I realized I was shaking so hard my teeth clicked. I kept the lights on until my eyes hurt. Every time the heat kicked, I imagined movement in the walls. I catch myself holding my breath like I was trying not to be heard, even though he was gone. In the morning, I called my landlord and lost my shit. He tried to soften it, try to make it sound like a weird inconvenience. I told him a man had been living under me, and he could either fix every access point and change every lock today, or he could deal with me breaking the lease and telling everyone exactly what kind of place he rents out. He got defensive, like I was the problem. That argument burned something in me. I packed like I was evacuating. Trash bags, boxes, whatever fit. I shoved my life into it. Friends helped, and I tried to act normal, but my eyes kept sliding to corners and vents like I expected a face. On my last trip out, I saw a single penny sitting perfectly flat on my kitchen counter near the knife block. I don't keep change there. Nobody else had been in that room except me. I stared at it until my skin prickled, then I swept it into the trash like it was infected. I drove away with my jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt and I didn't feel relief. I felt dirty. People say at least nothing happened. Fuck that. Something happened. Someone lived under me while I lived above him, and my home never felt clean again. I inspected houses for a living, which means I've crawled through enough basements to hate every one of them. That day, I was in an old split level that looked normal on paper. Fresh paint upstairs, staged furniture, realtor smile. I didn't waste time. I did the quick upstairs sweep, windows, faucets, toilets, while the agent hovered behind me, talking fast and watching my hands like I was stealing silverware. Every time I paused to write a note, she made a little noise like I was being rude. When I asked about permits for the obvious recent work, she waved it off and said the seller did everything right. Basements are where the real story sits, so I went down as soon as I could, flashlight out, boots on concrete, that dead air smell hitting me the second I clear the last step. I checked the panel, tested a few outlets, looked at the sump pit, tapped the support posts. Nothing jumped out. Then I put my palm on the back wall and felt it. One cold patch that didn't match the rest, like the concrete there held cold differently. It was tucked behind a cheap metal shelving unit placed too neatly, like a suggestion. I shoved the shelf aside and it scraped through dust in one clean pull, like it had been moved and returned to the same marks. My light caught a seam in the paint, too straight to be a crack, and down low there was a bent nail hammered sideways, half buried under grime like somebody wanted it to look like nothing. I knocked on it with my flashlight. Solid, solid, then hollow. Not stud wall, hollow, deeper. The sound came back late. I knocked again because I didn't want to accept it. Same answer. I hooked 2 fingers under the nail and pulled. The panel fought, then gave with a sticky rip, paint and damp letting go, and a breath hit my face, stale, wet sharp like a room that had been holding its mouth shut for years. My light cut into a little space, maybe 5 feet deep. No windows, no vents, just concrete and a floor drain. Then the details stacked up fast. Scratches on the inside of the panel, low and frantic, layered like someone kept trying until their hands failed. Not tool marks, hand marks. A ring bolt in the wall, rusted, set into cracked concrete like it had taken real force. A torn strip of fabric still caught in the threads, frayed like it got yanked until it quit. On the floor near the drain, a dark stain with scrub swirls around it, like somebody worked at it until their arms gave out. I didn't step in. I didn't touch anything. I just stood there with my arm out, light shaking, thinking somebody built this on purpose and somebody used it. You don't hide a room and put a bolt in it for innocent reasons. I took photos until my phone warned me about storage. Wide shots, close-ups, the seam, the nail handle, the scratches, the bolt, the fabric, the stain. I shot a short video sweep too, because people will call anything misunderstood if it's only stills. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, which pissed me off, but I couldn't fake calm in front of that door. I backed up the stairs and left the basement door open behind me, because the idea of it sticking shut made my skin crawl. Halfway up, I heard the agent's steps above me, pacing the kitchen. She wasn't surprised. She was annoyed. At the top, she planted herself in the narrow stairwell. Smile on, eyes hard. She didn't ask what I found. She asked what I did. I told her there was a concealed room. She snapped back that it was old storage, like saying it fast made it true. I tried to move past her, and she shifted with me, shoulder to shoulder, blocking my way. She told me to be careful with my report because I could ruin people, and when I didn't back off, she started saying my company would be sued for defamation. Like that word was a magic spell. I lifted my phone to show her the photos, and she reached for it. Not a playful grab, a real one, like she could just take it and make the problem disappear. I yanked it back and told her aloud to get the fuck out of my way. She swore at me, called me a hack, told me I was making up a crime because I liked drama. Then she tried to step down a stair again to trap me there. I shoved past her and got outside, because basements turn into traps when someone decides you shouldn't leave. She followed me to my truck, still talking, still trying to drag me back into the house with her voice. And when I ignored her, she switched tactics and got quiet, telling me I didn't understand what I was messing with. That hit harder than the yelling. I called my office from the driveway and gave them the facts while she stood a few feet away with her arms crossed, staring like she was taking my picture in her head. Then I called the non-emergency line and asked for police. Police came later and treated it like maybe nothing. They always do until it's too late. I showed them the photos, and one of them half joked that it could be some weird kink room. I told him to go look at the scratches before he got cute. He stopped smiling. The other officer kept glancing up the stairs at the agent, like he could feel the tension even without understanding it. One officer went down with me, found the seam, opened the panel, and when that stale breath rolled out again, I watched his jaw tighten. Gloves came on. He crouched, shined his light around, tugged the ring bolt lightly, and the cracked concrete around it flexed a hair. That bolt had been used. He asked me, quiet now, if the agent had known about it. I told him she knew enough to try to take my phone. He didn't answer, just looked up the stairs and nodded to himself like he'd file that away. Upstairs, the agent kept pushing storage, kept talking over my statement, kept acting like I was the offender. The second officer finally told her to back up, and she laughed like it was all ridiculous. They photographed it. They wrote things down. They asked if I'd seen a person in there. I said no, because I hadn't, and I watched that answer drain the urgency right out of the room. They taped the panel closed like tape, means anything on a hidden door. One of them gave me a case number on a little card and told me they'd follow up, and the way he said it sounded like a polite goodbye. I filed my report. I did the paperwork. I wrote it clean and clinical, because if you write what it feels like, people start calling you dramatic instead of doing their jobs. Concealed panel behind shelving. Scratch marks consistent with repeated attempts to open from inside. Ring bolt anchored in cracked concrete. Fabric remnant. Dark stain near drain. Time-stamped photos attached. That night I got home and scrubbed my hands until my knuckles burned like the smell was on me. I kept replaying that hollow knock. Solid, then empty. I slept like shit and woke up twice thinking I heard someone scratching at wood. The next day, the brokerage started calling, pushing me to soften language, asking if I was sure about what I saw, warning me about liability like liability is the scary part. A guy who called himself Risk said I should amend my notes to avoid implying criminal activity. I told him my notes don't imply anything. They describe. He said, real calm. That descriptions can be expensive. Then it went quiet in the worst way. Updates turned into voicemail. A detective told me, flat, that without a victim, they couldn't substantiate anything. Like the whole point of a room like that isn't to make sure you never get a neat victim to point at. I asked if they'd at least pull past owners, at least check missing persons, at least open the wall properly instead of peeking in with a flashlight. He told me they were reviewing options. 2 weeks later, I checked the listing because I could not. It was back up with new photos that didn't show the basement at all. No stairs, no utility room, nothing. Just bright angles, staged furniture, and words like move-in ready. I stared at the photo set until my eyes hurt because it felt like being told straight-faced that what I saw didn't count. I drove by once and saw a different lockbox and a different sign, like they'd swapped faces and kept moving. From the street, it looked harmless. That's what made me feel sick. I sat there watching people come and go with folders in their hands, smiling at the porch, and I wanted to jump out and scream, go downstairs, push the shelf, knock on the wall. I didn't. I just sat there because I'm not the police and I'm not stupid enough to go alone into a basement where somebody once decided a person could disappear. I kept working after that because bills don't care what you've seen, but I changed how I moved. I kept my keys in my pocket. I left basement doors open behind me. Anytime I saw a shelf shoved against a wall, my shoulders tightened. Anytime an agent crowded me on stairs, I got mean fast. That's the ending people hate. No confession, no body, just a sealed room that existed for a reason, and a house that kept selling like the past was optional. I bought the house because it had a finished basement and a price that didn't make me want to puke. First month, I kept it simple. Work, kid, dinner, laundry. I used the basement for storage and ignored it like everyone does. The first wrong detail showed up during a storm. A slow, rhythmic knock from below the stairs, too steady to be thunder. It had a pace like somebody keeping time with their knuckles. I stood at the sink with my hands in dishwater and just listened, waiting for it to stop so I could laugh at myself. It didn't stop. It came again, same spacing like it had all night. I popped the basement door and the air down there smelled off. Not old house off. Wet dirt, something sour, and that sharp metal stink that makes your jaw tighten. I hit the light and went down anyway with my phone flashlight because the bulb over the stairs always flickered like it was dying on purpose. Halfway down, I saw water spreading across the floor in thin sheets, sliding around boxes and the legs of my shelves. The sump pump sat there like a dead animal. The outlet was dead. I crouched, yanked the plug, jammed it back in, then tried the next outlet like I was bargaining with God. Nothing. I slapped the GFCI reset until my thumb hurt. Still nothing. I kept swearing because swearing felt like doing something. The knocking came back, louder now, not from the walls, not from the ceiling, right under the stairs, low and close, like a fist on wood from the other side. I told myself pipe. I told myself expansion. I told myself whatever would keep me from running upstairs and locking the door like a kid. Then I saw the little basement door under the stairs, the one I'd never opened because I didn't need another creepy storage space. It was shivering in its frame, not rattling from vibration, not loose hinges, shivering like something inside pushed and eased off, pushed and eased off, testing it. The handle didn't turn. The latch stayed still. The door itself moved. I backed up and my foot slid on a floating plastic lid. I went down hard. Cold water soaked my sleeves and slapped my ribs. My phone skated away and the screen died the second it hit the floor. I sat there for 1 stupid second staring at that black rectangle like it mattered, like my phone going dark was the real emergency. Upstairs, my kid yelled my name and started crying, and my whole brain changed shape. Part of me screamed, "Get out now." The other part screamed, "Don't you dare leave him up there alone." I tried to answer him, and my voice cracked like I was 12. I crawled because standing felt like a good way to crack my skull. The water bumped boxes and nudged bins like it had hands. The air got colder, not in a normal storm way, but like the house decided to shut a door somewhere and keep the cold in the basement with me. The knocking stopped for a beat, and I almost felt relief. Then it turned into scraping. Slow, patient. One long drag, pause, another drag. Not frantic, not angry, like I could do it all night and not get tired. I didn't look at the door again at first because I didn't want to see it bulge. I didn't want to see fingers under the gap. I just kept moving. When I reached the main stairs, I felt that ugly sensation you get when you know you're being watched, but you can't prove it. The scraping continued, steady like someone making sure I heard it. My knee hit the first step, then the next. I kept waiting for a hand on my ankle. Nothing touched me, but I still climbed like something did. I burst into the hallway dripping, and my kid stood there in socks, face wet, scared and pissed at the same time. I grabbed him too hard. He yelped, and I snapped without meaning to. He stared at me like I was a stranger. That guilt hit me right behind the eyes, hot and immediate, but I didn't have time to fix it. I hauled him up, locked the basement door without thinking, then unlocked it again because my hand was shaking and I couldn't remember which way I'd turned the key. I hated how useless I felt in my own house. I didn't call a friend. I didn't grab a coat. I ran next door in the rain with my kid clinging to my neck, wet jeans sticking to my legs. My neighbor opened the door, looking irritated, then saw us and went quiet. I tried to explain, and it came out in busted pieces. Basement. Flood. Pump dead. Knocking. I heard myself say, "Someone's in there," and I hated how it sounded, like I was trying to sell them a ghost story. My neighbor didn't argue, but I could feel the judgment anyway. That silent thing people do when you show up soaked and frantic and they decide you're either dramatic or dangerous. They called 911 while my kid shook against me. I sat on their couch and stared out the window of my house like it was a different house, like it belonged to someone I didn't like. The storm hit harder. Water ran down the street like it had been waiting to turn. The basement windows on my place were low and dark, and every so often I'd see a weird burp of brown water against the glass like the house was spitting. Firefighters showed up and acted calm the way they always do, which made me feel worse because I needed them to be alarmed. One of them did the polite half smile, and said storms cause floods like I didn't have eyes. I tried to tell him about the knocking, and he gave me the look you give a panicked parent. Not cruel, just dismissive. I almost lost my temper right there. My neighbor had that same look like, okay, buddy, sure. I wanted to scream at both of them. I'm not making this up. I don't have the energy to make up bullshit. I just bought this place, and I'm trying to keep my kids safe. They pumped the basement out. They sloshed around with lights and boots and dragged my ruined boxes away from the walls. That finished basement turned into a swamp of wet drywall and floating junk in one night. I stood at the top of the stairs and watched them work, and I didn't go down again. I couldn't. I kept seeing that understairs door shake. One of the firefighters called the other over. I heard him swear, real and sharp. He reached into the sump line access and yanked something out. Rags first, then hair. Not a little hair, not it washed in. A wad jammed down deep like someone had shoved it with a stick. The firefighter held it up in the light, dripping, and his face changed. Not scared, just different. Serious. He looked up at me and asked if I had issues with anyone. Ix. Nabit. Previous owner. The question hit me hard because it forced the obvious truth. This wasn't an accident. This was someone choosing my house on purpose. A cop showed up after. He walked through like it was a routine nuisance call. He asked the same questions in the same bored voice, wrote notes, and said, change your locks. I actually laughed this ugly little bark because locks weren't the point. Whoever did that didn't need inside. They just needed time and rain and me being alone. The cop didn't laugh. He looked at me like I was being disrespectful, like I was the problem. I wanted to punch a hole in my own wall. Insurance turned it into a fight. They asked for maintenance records like I'd lived there 10 years. They asked if the pump was old. They asked if I'd ignored warning signs. I argued until my throat hurt. A plumber came out, older guy, impatient, acted like I was another dumb homeowner making drama. Then he found more hair in the line and he went quiet. I asked him straight up how hard it would be for someone to do that. He didn't answer like it was a hypothetical. He just said it would take minutes if they knew where to access it. Minutes. That was it. Someone could ruin my basement in minutes and walk away. After that, everything I'd brushed off started lining up in my head like it had been waiting. The backyard gate, I swore I latched, sitting open one morning. The side lock feeling gritty, like somebody had shoved something into it. A muddy footprint on the basement stairs that I told myself was mine even though I take my shoes off at the door. I said it out loud once, and it sounded insane, and I hated that too. I hated being the person with the weird stuff happening story. I hated how fast people decide you're unreliable when your life stops being tidy. I replaced the pump. I tore out drywall. I changed the locks twice. I bought cameras I couldn't really afford and pointed them at the doors in the yard and the basement stairs. My kids started asking if the house was mad at us. I told them no. I told them it was just a storm. I heard myself lying, and it made me feel filthy. But what was I supposed to say? Yeah, buddy, somebody out there likes the idea of your dad going downstairs alone in the dark. The basement dried out mostly. The smell never fully left. Every time the heat kicks on at night, the ducks pop and my heart still jumps like a stupid animal. I still don't open that little door under the stairs. I can't even tell you why. It's probably just a storage nook. It's probably empty. But the memory of that door shivering in its frame sits in my chest like a rock. I can handle water. I can handle repairs. I can handle debt. I can't handle the idea that somebody watched my house, chose the timing, and set a trap that only works if you're a normal person trying to fix a normal problem. They never found who did it. I replaced the pump, replaced the drywall, replaced the locks, and still wake up when the house settles at night. Because the cruelest part wasn't the flood. It was knowing someone stood outside in the rain, messing with my basement, betting I'd go down there alone.